Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you for being here so late, and I'll try and go through this as quickly as possible. Okay, I'm going to start here. Okay. You want to go to the next one? Our presentation outline, I just want to go over this really quickly. We will be going over the pros and cons of expanded polystyrene, which is also known as styrofoam to many. Results of discussions with other agencies and stakeholders. We'll have an analysis of alternative food service ware, as well as conclusions and a proposed approach. EPS, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yes, I got to say that. The good, there are benefits of EPS. There are many benefits to the food service industry. As you know, EPS, it has exceptional insulating qualities. It keeps food really hot. That's why it's used by so many restaurants. It's very inexpensive. We know that an 8-ounce cup in bulk, you can get it for almost 3 cents each, so that's pretty cheap. And it's also very durable for takeout food service. So it's no question why it's highly used in the food service industry. The bad, the regional and global impacts. The most important and significant impact of EPS is to our marine life. Once EPS gets out onto our streets and beaches, it quickly starts disintegrating into small pieces, and those particles are eaten by our marine life, which ultimately leads to the death of that marine life. It's also produced from non-renewable resources, which would be oil, and it has potential human health issues. And it also results in the production of greenhouse gas emissions. The ugly, the local impacts. As you know, styrofoam is very lightweight, has flyaway tendencies, and it becomes a large source of litter on our streets and beaches. One study shows that 15% of styrofoam becomes litter in our streets and beaches. It also takes up airspace at the Tahigos landfill, and although it's less than 1%, it's still a source that we could be diverting. As part of our research, we were asked to contact other cities and to coordinate some meetings with stakeholders, and that's what I'll go over here. We contacted 5 of the 8 California cities that have been banned. We contacted all of them, but only established contact with 5 of them. Those cities are Calabasas, Malibu, Oakland, San Francisco, and Santa Monica. And we also coordinated a couple of meetings with state and local stakeholders. What we learned from the cities was that 4 of the 8 cities with ordinances have curbside composting programs currently. They also worked with their businesses anywhere from 3 months to 1 year on getting them into compliance with their ordinances. They knew cost would be an issue, but the cities tried to help a smooth transition, so they did everything from kind of put the businesses in contact with local distributors to working with them on their existing supply of serviceware until they made them transition over. All the cities had outreach. They had public hearings. They had information on websites. They created brochures. And one of the cities had an information table at places like Smart and Final, where they could directly speak with restaurant owners that went to purchase serviceware supplies. And they said that was the most effective way of speaking and getting in contact with the restaurant owners. At that point, they were also able to cut down on the misinformation that was going around in the community. One notable thing I think is important is that they noted that the businesses replaced EPS with plastics once they put the ordinance in place. And then all the cities relied on a complaint-driven enforcement technique. So all the cities had advice for us, and these are the top 3 pieces of advice they had. First and foremost was that education and outreach are essential in rolling out such an ordinance, that adequate staffing for education, outreach, and enforcement is important, and they all warned that we need to allow for adequate time to get the businesses to comply with the new ordinance. From the stakeholder meetings that we had, we found that there was a general support and concern for the environment from everybody that attended those meetings, and some of those involved the California Restaurant Association as well as many owners of local businesses. They were concerned with avoiding unintended consequences, meaning that they were concerned that we might try and some of the alternative products might have as much environmental impact as the EPS itself. And they were concerned with the lack of suitable alternatives and the product supply that's out there because this is a new product, or the biodegradable products are new. They were also, of course, concerned with the higher costs, and they felt that education is the answer to the litter problem, not changing products. And then lastly, they all preferred a voluntary compliance approach to enforcement. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and hand the presentation over to Eric Luella.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for staying so late to hear us speak to you. When we came to this step in my half of the presentation, you came to us and said, we want you to investigate EPS and we want you to come back with a staff report. And that's what this presentation is based on. What the question was, should we ban styrofoam? Can we ban styrofoam? What does that look like? As we begin to have these stakeholder meetings, these meetings where we met with a lot of people in the industry, everyone from Get Oil Out to Dark Container that sells 50 million styrofoam containers, we talked to them, what we realized that there was another question that a lot of jurisdictions haven't asked, which is, we want to ban styrofoam because it's a threat to our community, but we're not asking people to ban to-go. What we're asking them to do is stop using styrofoam. So that means we're going to have to replace styrofoam with something else, because we're not changing the way people are purchasing things. And so this half of the presentation is an analysis of, if we did ban styrofoam, what would we replace it with? It's some of those alternatives. And so I'm going to talk you through several of those different alternatives and then look at the broader discussion that we had based on that. So first, starting with paper, it's an obvious alternative. A lot of people use it in the community. One of the great things about paper is that it can be recycled when it's clean. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. The cons, a lot of people don't realize that paper is an absolutely destructive process in terms of production. You have to find the tree. First, you have to grow the tree. You have to find the tree. You have to build a road to get to that section of the forest, cut it, log it, move it, pulp it, bleach it, then press it, then ship it, and it's very heavy. So all of those processes using a fantastic amount of energy. Paper production is actually 11% of our total domestic energy usage in the United States. That's a lot. Houses take up 21% as a perspective on that. So greenhouse gas emissions are immense from paper production. And the consideration is, and you can see in that Chinese to-go container there, if you've ever put to-go food in a Chinese container, it somehow doesn't leak through by the morning. That's because it's lined in polyethylene, which is oil, which makes it unrecyclable. And so a lot of those to-go containers with paper are not recyclable. And if they're contaminated with the food, you can imagine if that container is thrown in and that food gets on any of the other paper products or any of the other goods that we can recycle in there, a lot of those become less desirable to recycle. So you can actually downgrade. One of the great things we have is single stream recycling. It all goes in the same box, but that also makes it more susceptible to contamination. So that's a consideration. So we can look at plastic. It's readily available. It's recyclable. We have a collection system in place that accepts all types of plastic. Well, the challenge is it's still made from petroleum, and that causes quite a bit of greenhouse gas emissions, both in the production of the petroleum and the exploration, and then the actual production of the good. And then the other consideration is, just as with paper, it has to be clean and it has to be empty. And a lot of people, if there is residue left on their plastic, they'll still throw it in either recycling or the trash. And then we risk threatening our current recycling stream, which is robust, 74% for residential. Aluminum. I've been asked a lot of questions about, why don't we just use aluminum? That's an easily recyclable product. And that's what I'd like to focus on for just a second. Because of the resource intensity associated with aluminum, if you just type in on Google aluminum production, it's a really fascinating read in the sense that aluminum production is probably the single most destructive product we use in our industrial society, because it takes so much energy to produce aluminum. Aluminum does not exist in nature. We have to actually make it through an energy-intensive process. And so the problem is, if you even miss one aluminum container, you've negated quite a bit of energy, of which, say, there could be many more of a certain different product made. The idea is it's equal to many more. And so there are significant energy emissions, substantial environmental impacts to producing aluminum. And then we liked it to be clean also. So then we have compostables, and that's something a lot of people have been talking about lately. Many businesses in Santa Barbara are already using it. Laguna Blanca School has actually started their entire school lunch program is using compostable materials. The pros about compostable materials, and there are significant pros, you can turn it into something that's valuable instead of something that's waste. It's really not even waste if it's composted, because you can turn it into a valuable soil amendment, and it's made from renewable resources. There is a substantial energy involved in producing it. The actual production of it does take more energy than some other products, but at the end of it, it's kind of recycled in a sense, but really what you're doing is you're producing a soil amendment, and you can keep that locally right here. All of that energy goes back into the growing process. The cons about it, and there are several, especially right now, we don't have a collection system for compostable products. And this is a big challenge. I've been getting several dozen calls now from people talking about this. And when you take a compostable material and you throw it in the trash, it tries to compost. The problem is in our landfills, those are the worst places for things to compost because our landfills are designed to not allow air in. But air gets in. Very, very little air. And the bugs that eat things in a landfill when there's no air produce methane. The bugs that eat things when there is air produce carbon dioxide. So we have 23 times more potent of a gas being released every time we bury anything that's biodegradable. And so the challenge is, if we have all of these people switching to compostables, but we don't have a composting stream in place, we're actually creating a worse problem probably. And I have told many people this, I would rather you use plastic until we have a compost stream or until you can compost it. Work with a farmer, work with a rancher, there are other options. But that's been my point so far. And then there's several other challenges. I wish I could hand this to you right now. It looks like plastic. It actually says number 7 and has the recycling Mobius on it. It's made from corn. A lot of people have been talking about corn plastic that's out there. This is made from U.S. domestic corn. It's called NatureWorks PLA. And I'm supportive of PLA because it does compost very well. The problem is, this came from Albertsons. My friend brought this to my house and he said, what do I do with this? You can't throw it in the recycling. Because if you throw it in, it's made from corn plastic, not from petroleum plastic, and you actually contaminate the domestic recycling stream. So like we said, we have this fantastically robust recycling stream, 2% of this, and you have to throw the whole load out. So what happens if everyone starts going to compostables, but we can't put them in the right container? Yeah, there are a lot of problems and questions here, and this is an incredible challenge that we're facing with compostables if we don't have a compost stream in place. And these are here. This is Albertsons. You know, this isn't a little grocery store in town. These are the big players. So what we're seeing is people are starting to move towards these kinds of compostables, but we don't have anywhere to put them. And there is a significant environmental impact if we don't make a choice where we can put them.
Except your backyard.
That's right. That's right. And people can put some in their backyard. They take quite a bit of time to do, but I have put some in mine, and they do eventually go away. So looking at commercial compostables, they're made to be put in a commercial compost facility. If you have any substantive number of them, they have to go somewhere. And they break down readily, 30 to 45 days, if they're in a commercial-sized facility. But as we mentioned earlier, landfilling them is a huge issue because you're creating methane. And then clear PLA, which is what I pointed out here. Mr. Armstrong, can we pass that up to them? You'll actually see a little sticker on there. It says, made from corn. That can represent a real threat to our stream. And the traditional plastics industry is very afraid of this because they're afraid that traditional recycling could be impacted negatively. And we're not really sure how to address it. But I did sign, as recycling coordinator or technician for the city, I did sign a moratorium on PLA that said we need to look at this more closely before we aggressively pursue PLA. So what we came to after this discussion of all of these issues, we talked with several staff, we met with a lot of people, and we read multi-hundreds of pages of primary and secondary technical documents. And what we came to was this impacts matrix. We generated this because there is no comprehensive scientific study in the world, to our knowledge, that addresses the question we need to answer. And so what we did is we took paper, EPS styrofoam, plastic, compostables, and then reuse. This coffee mug I'm using right in front of me, reuse. And we rated them not just on one level of what their impact is, but on 3, because we see it in that way. Greenhouse gas emissions, net energy, how much it takes in the whole process, human environmental health, that includes marine impacts, and then landfill diversion, what it looks like in our landfill. And landfill diversion also includes methane in a sense. And so what we came to the understanding of is, next slide, We have all of them rated here, and you can see in the different colors, each one is split up. And then, if we take a look at it, and cumulatively, paper, styrofoam, and plastic, based on our analysis, and I think this is supported by several solid waste professionals in our field, they're all about the same impact. They all have different impacts, but when you look at them cumulatively, they're very close. The only one that takes a significant step down, but still has impacts, is compostables, because it still takes basically renewable goods to grow and then be produced to use. Reuse is way farther down. Obviously, you can use a coffee mug 1,000 times, and then it has very little impact once it goes in the landfill. Everything else does. So we came to this understanding, and we started to talk about this, and a lot of jurisdictions are talking about it in a similar way, but they haven't made these findings public yet, and we've been getting a lot of questions from them. What we found is that on a regional and global level, the most significant impact of EPS is on marine life. But although it has the highest impact, the impacts of other things can be proportionately high. Are we trading, say, marine pollution here for air and river pollution somewhere else, say from aluminum production or paper production? And those are significant. So excluding reuse, compostables offer a lower overall impact from the other materials if they're composting. So banning EPS is the right thing to do, and it is feasible, but only when we have a comprehensive organics collection system in place. That's the only answer we found, unless you basically ban to go. So our proposed approach is to expand our existing public education, and you guys have done that with our full-time staff conversions, and outreach efforts with additional emphasis on anti-littering, getting people to understand that they need to put things in the right containers and they need to stay there instead of throwing them in our parks. Developing a comprehensive organics diversion program. Our food scraps collection pilots passed 160,000 pounds. It's going exceptionally well. All of them are absolutely thrilled to be a part of it. And once we have a comprehensive organics collection, a recycling program in place, we can implement that ban, and it can be successful because we can mandate the use of something better. And we're both happy to answer any questions that you do have.